Very good morning to all distinguished delegates and our very honorable guest of honor for the day, the chief guest of the day, Dr. Kalai Selvi, who's leading the scientific brigade of the country at the moment towards this new fuel revolution that we are talking about. My colleague, Dr. V.K. Garg, Dr. Anil Garg, and Ragini Gargji, and all distinguished delegates. We're assembling here on a twin event, the World Hydrogen Energy Summit and the World Future Fuel Summit. We had planned to make it an inaugural event with the leading light of the scientific and industrial research in the country, Dr. Kalai Selvi. One, for the reason that she's a scientist, and secondly, she represents a part of community which is Shakti in our country. And I think if revolution begins here and is led by a lady scientist, we stand to gain tremendously. We have in our midst Professor G.D. Yadav, who will be honoring today. We'll be honoring Dr. Monica Normark, Mr. Agnel Cheruvatur, Dr. J.P. Gupta, another leading light, and Dr. Madhak MacLean. These are all distinguished scientists who are leading this great revolution in energy sector that we are envisaging. We had also planned to have here Mr. Nagendranath Sinha representing industry, a very hard to abate sector, the steel sector, but unfortunately he just held up in an important meeting and he could not make it. So green steel is the steel that they're looking at, and that is one of the toughest nuts to crack. So we had thought that we bring in somebody who's leading the scientific revolution, and we also make a secretary of one of the hardest to abate sectors to come and present before you the challenge that lies before the world, and more so for developing countries. Because developing countries, as we all know, are yet on the path of providing the inputs of growth, of development to their citizens. At the moment, we are witnessing extreme climate events. As I talk to you, we've been having extremely stormy, almost monsoon-like weather in northern Haryana, in parts of Himachal and Punjab right now. That's most unusual for this part of the year. So change in climate is certainly there. We can all perceive it. I was born and brought up in Delhi. I do not remember such a warm September in Delhi. The focus of this conference is really bring forth green hydrogen, as Dr. Garg has explained also. How do we handle this energy transition? Let us face the stark reality. Just yesterday, I was talking to the CMD of the NTPC. I was informed that 85% of the incremental power demand is still being met by coal. That's the hard reality. If a revolution has to come, to tackle this climate change, we have to go the way the leadership of this country was trying to orient G20, meet which just concluded recently. These scientific and technological brains of the world have to get together. The finances have to be provided. Industry and youth have to understand which is the way forward. It's a revolution that is almost as tough as for developing countries like India to shake off the yoke of colonial rule. It doesn't begin and end with the government. Government can only push this revolution, but ultimately it comes down to the citizens of the country, the industrialists of the country, technologists of the country, and all educational institutions to churn out that kind of youth into the mainstream, which will see a new world. Dr. Garg had hinted on the fuel side, what are the dangers of interfering with the food chain? From the time I was a joint secretary in the government, we've been talking about using these agricultural products as fuel. But fuel and food go together. And we have to be extremely sensitive to the food needs of the world. So it comes back virtually to first setting right the basic fuel, and the direction is hydrogen, but it is easier said than done. The cost, the affordability of it is an issue that is going to constantly bite us. The multilateral banks of the world have to come forth in a spirit as determined, virtually as the scenario post-Second World War. They've got to lay bare finances, targeted missions, and move towards this revolution. But the hard reality is that the powers that be of the world, they talk about developing countries not moving away from coal. We talk of pollution, but nobody talks about the global effects of constant wars that have been engaging in Europe and now in Central Asia. What are they contributing to this kind of change in the environment, living conditions of people, and also huge drain on resources? While we are talking of a future fuel summit, we are conscious of the fact that inflation in the world is directly connected to oil and gas prices. And oil is certainly not coming down from the $90 peg right away. And gas is directly connected to it. We are talking of these fuels, the chain, how the gases will be evolved, which we can replace the hydrocarbon gases. People have become used to clean kitchens in developing countries like India. And the fact is that in one of the southern states that's going into election mode, the price of the gas cylinder is a major issue. And it's come out in manifesto. And it will be in the future also. every citizen of developing countries has an aspiration to move towards a cleaner environment, a cleaner and a better living. So when we are talking of the second part, that is fuel, we come back to a theme that I've often talked about on this very forum, and that is there's nothing known as waste in the world. It's only our lack of scientific and technical knowledge and the will to process that waste into useful energy and use it. And that will vary from region to region within a country. The vast agricultural waste, the mountains of solid waste that we are building in our metros, which will be death traps for the future. Because when these rains come, monsoon rains, particularly in tropical areas, they're going to wash down rivers of acidic and toxic liquids, which are going to contaminate the soil, which are going to contaminate our water sources. So putting these two themes together, in fact, is a way to change the way we are living and to try and chart a course for the future generation. And the task for this generation is to lay down the foundations of that change and determination to lead from the front. I'll be very frank. I think that demonstration has not come so far. We are flooded with a range of automobiles which go by power, and the pollution and the harmful effects are not really being talked about. The citizen has to take charge. And why this conference involves young people always as an equal measure to those who are at the helm of affairs in the various fields is that if this generation takes over this task, the job is more than half done. It is their orientation, the mental orientation, and the technological challenge that has to move towards driving us towards the net zero. Well, some countries have placed 2050 as a target. We in India have placed 2070. But for people like me, I bother when the peaking year is not set, peaking year of emissions. It's only when you climb that summit that you know that I cannot exceed this point. And thereafter we've got to come down. It's a hard task, but we have got to bite the bullet. And this will not happen, again I repeat, till finances are provided and compulsorily set aside for these missions. And this will not happen without cessation of a double speak. The big powers of the world, the industrial powers of the world, have not talked about these imperatives in very reassuring terms. Until that happens, until we decide that technology will not become an economic dominator or a source of economic domination. Things are not going to change. Inequality may increase, dissatisfaction, discomfort may increase. Luckily, countries like India and China have made rapid strides, particularly China, in moving towards this kind of revolution. We represent a substantial portion of the global population. But let us not forget that there is Africa, there are the Americas, southern one particularly. We've got to take along. We've got to take the whole world together. Actions by a few countries to gain economic domination through these two revolutions that are the focus of our conference are not going to change the world. May increase inequality. If we do not build equity and if we do not build transparency and co-ownership of assets into this whole situation. We're meeting in a city which is a city of whom we call the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. His concept was of common ownership of wealth. Now that common ownership message has to be sent. Again, it's a very difficult message. It is not even being sent across cities, enlightened cities, where even the US reports are showing that there are vast areas of inequality and deprivation in those countries also. Why I mention this is we're coming back to the chain of ownership, common ownership of new technology, common ownership of new scientific ideas, and not making it as an instrument of economic domination and economic colonization. I won't say more, I've said enough, and I think we are all eagerly looking forward to the great scientific efforts being made in the country and also globally to the address of our guest of honor, Dr. N. Kalai Selvi, who enlightened us a few months ago in another event, and I'm sure she will lead the way again and show us the path and update us. Thank you very much.